Welcome to the Creation Reformation YouTube channel, where we go throughout the region of New England and we talk about what we see, the wildlife, the nature, the biology and geology, and we do it all from the perspective of a biblical young earth creationist. I am Jake Ramgren, your creation tour guide, as we go through the region of New England and we find all sorts of cool things to talk about and discuss and relate back to the beauty of God's creation, and as well as the young earth creation models that scientists are building today. Right now, I'm hiking through the woods of the Goodwin State Forest, and I've been noticing a lot of trees that have these gnaw marks all over them from these rodents that we have in the New England region. Hopefully you already know what I'm talking about. There's a great example of one right here. This tree has been gnawed down by a beaver. Castor canadensis is the scientific name there. And I want to stop and talk a little bit about the natural history of beavers and the lifestyle of beavers and just everything beaver today. That's what we're going to do. And so you already know, hopefully, that beavers are rodents. They have the big, thick, flat tail that they use to slap the water. And they also gnaw down lots of trees to build beaver dams and to build their lodges where they actually stay. But here we're just going to look at this tree for a little bit and talk about the strategy that beavers use when they gnaw down trees. Because it turns out, this is something you might not know about beavers, beavers are not actually around for the most part when the tree actually falls. They don't gnaw, and then step back and watch the tree fall, kind of like we do when we use our axes to chop down trees. No, they actually gnaw up to a certain point, and then they go about their day, and they leave, and eventually they check back to see if the tree has fallen yet. And eventually, of course, a big gust of wind will come by and knock the tree down that they have gnawed almost to that point. And so I'm going to zoom up on this tree, and you can see for yourself, of course, obvious gnaw marks from the beaver all the way, but not quite all the way to the top. So they have gnawed all the way around and have made a small circle where they let the tree, they left, right? This is where the tree actually separated from the trunk, from the bottom, from the base. And so this is where it's fallen over, and then everywhere around it is, of course, beaver gnaw marks. And then some fungi that have grown on the tree now that the inside of the tree has been exposed. So really, really cool kind of strategy there from the beavers. And this is done mostly to protect the beavers, because if they gnaw the rest of the way, there's always the risk of the tree actually falling right on top of them. And this has happened even with this precaution. Sometimes they gnaw a little too much. Sometimes a particularly strong gust of wind comes through too early, and the tree actually falls and lands on their head and crushes their skull. And so it's a really unfortunate thing. So it's not exactly a safe occupation for the beaver. But again, you can just see, even when this tree when this part of the tree right here that I'm pointing at was right here and it was standing up, the beaver gnawed a little bit on the top half too. Like, it knew exactly where the tree would break, and it gnawed around it, and then knew exactly when to leave the tree because it was unstable enough that a gust of wind was going to take it down. So really, really cool. It's just incredible engineering, really, from a beaver to understand how far it has to go and where it has to gnaw. And what's even more remarkable is that if I just had this information right here in front of me to work with, I could still locate a beaver lodge or a beaver dam from here. So if I'm standing right here, and here's my body of water, and I'm thinking, I know there is a beaver on this pond because it's been gnawing down these trees. Where can I find a beaver lodge or a beaver dam? Well, it turns out even most scientists don't even know how they do this. And I say most because I don't know. I'm sure there are theories and hypotheses, but people don't know how they do this. But a beaver, even though it gnaws the tree and then leaves and lets the wind blow it down, trees almost always, a vast majority of the time, they fall in the direction of the lodge or the dam that they are going to use the tree to build. So of course it's not going to drag the entire this entire tree trunk here, but it's going to let the wood rot, and then it's going to take down some branches and use some of the wood. But this is obviously too big for it to drag. But needless to say, this tree has fallen in the direction where we probably will see a beaver lodge or a beaver dam. So this is the trail I came from, and it leads to a trail that goes in that direction. So I think there's going to be a beaver lodge right down here where this tree is pointing. So I'm going to hike along this trail a little bit more. And when I come across a beaver lodge or a beaver dam, I will stop and finish this video and talk more about the natural history of beavers there. So for you, it'll just be a few seconds. So I'll see you in a little bit when I get to the beaver lodge. Sure enough, I have located a beaver lodge right where the tree told me it would be. If you remember, I was standing facing the water a little bit up the trail in that direction, and the tree had fallen pointing to the left, as in further down in this direction, and this brought me right to the beaver lodge. So the tree was very accurate, pointing almost directly to where the beaver lodge actually is. So this is what a beaver lodge looks like. It's very obviously not a beaver dam. This is where the beavers actually live. And it gives me a good excuse to sit down here and talk a little bit about the natural history of beavers, which, as I've already teased to you, is one of the more interesting in the animal kingdom to talk about. So beavers, quite literally, it could be said, built this country. And they built this country in two ways. The first way is by contributing to Americans building some of our largest cities. So in the beginning of the colonization process, when Europeans were coming and clearing away trees for land, this was a very dense wilderness, right? Very, very dense, lots and lots of trees. And it was very much a pain to clear away the trees to put in buildings. And so while private landowners, right, people who come in and stake a claim on land and they would clear away some trees, they wouldn't necessarily do this. But the big cities that America has now owes their origin to a beaver which built a dam and swamped a whole area full of water. And then this water killed all the trees in the area. All the trees would fall over, and then all people had to do to get a lot of land at once was to drain the water, right, break the beaver dam or drain it somewhere else, and you would have a vast amount of land with no trees in it. And so while private landowners didn't quite do this so much, they tried to stake a claim in the wilderness. They could clear away some trees and just look out for kind of themselves and their families. Big cities, like I said, owe their existence partially to a beaver, which cleared out all the trees for them. So that's one way that beavers built this country, is by helping us make our big cities. The second way that beavers built this country, maybe not quite as happy or productive as a way to build a country, but they fueled one of our biggest early industries, and that is, of course, the beaver industry, trapping. Americans and other nationalities, there were French people, there were all sorts of immigrants who would go out west and they would trap thousands and thousands of beavers. And they would use beaver pelts as either trade with the Native Americans, or they would send them back east to get a profit. Beaver pelts were extremely popular clothing items as hats, and really in general as blankets for whatever they needed to use them for. Beaver pelts were extremely popular, extremely trendy, and turned a massive profit because people in the east couldn't just go out and find a beaver. Someone else had to go out, trap them from out west, and then send them back east in large numbers. So it drove this industry of people moving out west and really led to civilization coming to the western United States. But eventually this industry died out, partially because people found bison, and bison, the trends change, fashion changes, and now we have found bison, and bison have an abundance of uses as well. So people started hunting bison instead of the beavers. But the other reason is that there were really no more beavers left to trap. Beavers nearly went extinct in the western US. So this leads me to one of my favorite stories in the history of conservation in the US. At this point, it's the 1940s or 1950s. Beavers have not recovered from the hunting that was done to them in the late 1700s and early 1800s. And so people decide they found out that beavers were actually pretty important to the environment. It was originally thought that beavers were bad for the environment. People actually came in and thought that when beavers built a dam, they were preventing fish from migrating or traveling through the water networks that were here when the colonists got here. They thought beaver dams were bad. They wiped out trees and then they stopped migrating fish. But it turns out beaver dams are incredibly important for the environment and for the ecosystem, because when they build a dam, it stops nutrient flow. If the beaver dam wasn't there, nutrients would keep flowing along the river and they would never settle. But when a beaver dam is built, the nutrients do settle down, and that's how you get really good plant growth and wildlife flourishes and all of these things, because you have nutrient-rich water. And so beaver dams actually turn out to be incredibly important, which is not what scientists originally thought. The early scientists in the 1800s thought that beaver dams were actually bad. So that kind of goes to show you that scientists actually don't know everything. And so more information is always going to change what you currently believe at a given time. And of course, they were also under pressure for saying it's okay to kill beavers because beaver pelts, again, were driving this country forward. So there's a lot going on back then, but that goes to show you, we don't know everything, and the more we learn, the more we're actually going to change our position or our opinions on certain things. And that was the case with beaver dams. That was a thing that people had to switch on and change their minds about. Now, and it turns out also, I almost forgot to mention this, that the fish did not have any problem getting past the beaver dam. When water levels were high enough, fish could jump over the beaver dams, and sometimes beaver dams were built with enough space between the branches that fish could kind of slither their way through. So fish weren't actually getting stopped by the beaver dams. They could still migrate and travel from lake to river pretty easily. So again, more information that you learn changes your opinion on whether or not something is important for the ecosystem or for the environment. So back to my conservation story, what we're at now is people know that beavers are important to the environment, but we don't have beavers anymore because they were hunted to near extinction. So what did they do? Well, again, like I said, it was the 1950s, so we're shortly after the end of World War II. We had World War II era planes sitting around with nothing to do because the war was, thank God, over. So what they actually did was they had some populations that were healthy in the eastern United States. So they went out and they trapped some beavers in the east, and they put them in wooden crates. And then they brought these wooden crates onto these World War II era planes and flew them out to the west, and especially the state of Idaho. For whatever reason, Idaho worked the best. So they flew to Idaho, and they would find these large clearings where there wasn't a lot of trees in the way, and there was a water source the beaver could access, and they dropped the crates out of these World War II era planes, and the crates would parachute to the ground. Now, they designed the crates to spring open when they hit the ground, but of course you can't guarantee that a box is spring open as soon as it hits the ground. What if it lands wrong and doesn't open? Well, that's why the crates were made of wood. If it lands and this box does not spring open, the animal eats wood. That's its primary diet. So as soon as the box lands, if it didn't open, the beaver would chew its way out. And voila, your beavers are safe and they are back in the West where they need to be to make the ecosystem flourish. So this was how population started to rebound out west. It was a fairly successful effort. However, it was banned as a practice eventually for a couple of reasons. One is kind of a gruesome reason, which is that they realized that these big clearings they were dropping beavers into was prime habitat for mountain lions. And mountain lions are the beaver's #1 predator, especially at that time when there were obviously a lot more beavers and a lot more mountain lions. So unfortunately, they realized that they might have been dropping beavers literally to immediately be eaten by mountain lions, which were, of course, prowling through their territory. And if you're dropping them in a wide open clearing, it doesn't give a beaver much time to settle in and find places to hide and do its thing in the body of water. So it was something that they realized that might be happening, and so they stopped doing this program. And of course, also there was an unfortunate case where a beaver was so panicked as it was falling to the ground in the crate that it chewed its way out of the crate so quickly that it was too high up when it chewed its way out, and it fell tragically to its death. So for a couple of reasons, they stopped parachuting beavers as that for conservation purposes, though it was successful and did rebound some beaver populations, especially in the state of Idaho. And you can look up, there are some news articles now, they have uncovered old archived footage, video footage and photos of parachuting beavers. So you can look up parachuting beavers and you will find pictures from the 1950s of crates with parachutes that have beavers in them falling to the ground. So that's how we rebounded our beaver populations. It's a goofy, silly story that I love telling because it's fairly unknown, of course. And that's kind of the reason for this YouTube channel, that we can go around through the region of New England. We see something cool like this beaver lodge, and I can talk about the natural history and share some things that maybe other people don't know. So that's kind of all I have for you. There you have it. That's some of the natural history of beavers, Castor canadensis, incredibly important for ecosystems and environments here in the New England area. And another testament to the fact that scientists don't know everything at every given time. And even now, we don't know everything there is to know about beavers. We still don't know how they're such good engineers that they can cut down trees to the point where the tree always lands in the direction of their lodge or their dam. So that'll do it for me. This is the Creation Reformation YouTube channel. If you want more nature encounters, more content on the beautiful flora and fauna of New England, and you want to hear it from the perspective of a creationist, I'm your guy. I'm a creation zoologist, and I'm here at the Creation Reformation YouTube channel to give you exactly that content. So I appreciate you watching, and I will catch you next time.